Oh, hey, I think we are still live.
Of course.
We're live because I'm looking at the Zoom settings and it says I have the option to stop live stream. Awesome. Well, we'll see if this works. So that was a nice soft landing for an intro. So okay, here we go. So what I just want to ask you a couple questions because we can get into the whole debate about the rankings and the playoffs, but here's one thing I wanted to ask you. Like with Ohio State just now playing Penn State and the way they performed and like going for like 3.5 quarters and inexplicably like the mushrooms wore off or something. I don't know what happened with them. They just turned it around at 3.5 quarters left, and they scored like what 3 touchdowns. I think I couldn't have possibly been more touchdowns.
Yeah, it
than
was
that. I
like
think
maybe even
three.
four. I think there was like 4 scores in 6 minutes or something crazy.
That's insane. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, does that worry you at all?
Yeah, of course. Part of it, I think, was they started going into hurry up, and Penn State had no answer for that. And then part of it was,
Yeah.
then also, of course, the defense and JTT were also at the same time as our offense also taking over. So, I mean, it should have been a much bigger lead early on because we had 2 interceptions right out of the gate, and we weren't able to really capitalize as quickly as we should have. Part of the problem was Mayan Williams went down really early after, a couple carries, and looks like he broke a couple fingers and dinged up his knee again. But apparently the injury wasn't too bad. And then the other issue was, for some reason, we kept trying to do all these screen passes out to the sides, and our tight end.
Oh, yeah, the bubble.
Yeah, so the bubble screens, it's a good play call when they're trying to jam up the middle of the field to stop your run. That's one of the things you're supposed to do. But our receivers and our tight end could not block their corners. Their defense. It's just like everything, or everything's all about matchups. Like, so their secondary was really good in a lot of areas, not everyone, and their secondary was very aggressive, and they're good at stopping plays like that. And our receivers and tight ends are not as good at blocking that kind of offense. So, you're running that to, do that and to keep the defense honest and also to set up other things. But it clearly was not working. And then every time we wanted a mid-range pass, those were open all day. So I think people were frustrated we weren't going to that more. But I think that it seemed like Day just wanted to practice that bubble screen because we're going to need to be able to figure that out at some point. And it's just frustrating that it took so long for them to just say screw it and go back to the normal offense that we do, which is 15, 25-yard passes down the middle, which are unstoppable on this team.
Yeah. So what's the biggest concern for you right now for the Buckeyes?
Health.
That's kind of like if I'm looking at it.
Yeah, it's easy. It's health. So our number one corner, Cam Brown, was out.
Is he still out?
Well, he was out. I don't know how long he's been out, but I know he was out this game. So we had a freshman in place of him, and he was really bad in this game. And then the other issue, of course, Mayan Williams. I don't know how long he's going to be out. He's way better than Travion Henderson right now. He's just more reliable. Travion gets more home runs, but Mayan Williams just, he just gets 5, 6, 8 yards all the time. He just makes the offense go because people can't stop him. And then, then JSN, if he's still supposed to come back at some point. I don't know if he'll be back by Michigan or the playoffs. It might be like one of those deals like where we played Alabama in the title game. They got their star receiver back for the title game. As long as we get him back this year. I mean, I just can't even imagine having him on this offense with everybody else. That would just be crazy. And then, yeah, so it's just offense, really. I mean, it's just, our lack of depth at corner is a little bit problematic because Denzel Burke, I think he had some sort of hand or wrist issue. Something was broken a few weeks ago and he missed some time too. So like our top two corners have missed a good amount of time this year. So that's been concerning because we don't really have much depth. Like for some reason, we have like 6 healthy corners or something. I mean, 5 this last week. So, if we lose somebody else or whatever, I mean, that's like the biggest concern. It's like the corner depth, really, especially because of all the top teams that we're going to be going against. Like if you had to go against Tennessee I guess really only Tennessee, but I mean, you need to be able to stop those big receivers.
I like how you're making the assumption that you're going to beat Michigan and that the biggest issue is
we don't
even
necessarily need to beat Michigan. We could have a close loss and still potentially make it in with one. Yeah. And Michigan could as well. It'd be harder for you guys since your strength schedule isn't as good. But you guys will play Illinois too, so that'll help a little bit. Who would have thought?
Yeah, it's funny because
who would have thought Illinois would have been padding your strength of schedule?
Yeah, I know. That's interesting. Yeah, looking at the Buckeyes, like from my perspective, like as a Michigan guy, I love seeing them play bad against Penn State. But at the same time, I didn't want them to lose. Like, I don't want them to lose to Penn State. Like, already, like all of the intangibles are on the Buckeye side right now for that Michigan versus Ohio State game. It's at Buckeye Stadium in the shoe. Like, they lost last year, so it's not like they're going to take Michigan lightly. If they're pissed, like everything about that game screams the Buckeyes are going to win that game. And I can't consciously say that I think that Michigan, I mean, they have a chance in that game, but I just don't think they're going to win. Just have to hope that it's a close game.
Well, I mean, you have a good defense and a good running game. I mean, that'll keep you in most games.
Well, yeah, true. But I know deep in my heart that Ohio State's not going to play the way they did against Penn State when they play Michigan. Like, they're not going to play the way they did against Iowa, against Michigan. Like, all that stuff's going to be cleaned up. Like, they're just not going to do it. Last year, there were too many things going in Michigan's favor. As far as, like, I wouldn't say the weather. I think that's kind of a cop-out because they both had to play in it. And the Buckeyes didn't have a problem moving the ball. They just had a problem in the red zone and running the ball, which is kind of like their problem they had this year too, that we thought, basically were fixed. But what about your defense? Because, like, Penn State had a day on that defense. They were running the ball. I mean, they had a lot of big plays in the passing game, but that was probably the best offense you guys have played since Toledo. So I don't think that defense has been tested until Penn State.
Well, yeah, I mean, like I said, it's different than our defense last year in that last year when we had plays that opponents made, there was glaring scheme issues also. Okay.
Yeah.
And this year there hasn't been any of that. So whenever there's a problem, it's because individual players just sometimes screw up. So like that 158-yard pass by the receiver, the safety in the freshman corner basically ran into him and bounced off of him and didn't tackle him. And then he just ran, after a 10-yard pass, ran another 50, 40, 45 yards or something. So that's just, there's nothing wrong with the scheme on that. It's just the guys have to make the tackle. And, I'd hope that the starter, if he was in, he would make that play. But, your backups need to be able to make a tackle too. And, it's really like they need to find a way to, when one person, like their whole team was like one person. Like they have one guy, just like Marvin Harrison was our whole offense. The only difference was we had, running back made a couple plays and our defensive end got us some points too. I mean, that's really the difference between us and them. Like they had a receiver that played well, we had a receiver that played well, but then we also had, a few other things go our way. But the thing that bothers me too about comparisons, so like you can never use the transitive property because you have, like, so Penn State has a good pass defense, but their run defense isn't as good. And so Michigan's strength is a running game, and Penn State has a different defense that's not really built to stop the power run. And, so Michigan could just completely destroy that. Whereas,
They
against
bulldoze
us,
them. Yeah.
their defense is built to sort of slow down our type of offense. Although, eventually didn't work either, but at least they did it a little
Not
bit
the
better
pass.
than we did against you.
I don't know why they were able to slow down the run though. So I think that would be my, and it really is in short yardage too.
Travian Henderson just isn't that good this year.
Yeah, he was great last year.
Well, he was great, I think, at the beginning of last year, and then I don't know if he got hurt or something in the middle, but he definitely trailed off the second half last year, and hasn't been that great. He doesn't like hit the hole like. Basically, he reminds me kind of I mean, I don't want to compare him to Lionel Ross, but like running backs in our past that where someone hits them and they just fall down immediately. Like if you hit their ankle or you hit them, like he doesn't break tackles. Like if there's a big hole and he can get through there, he'll break it for a 50-yard touchdown. But like he doesn't have the power to break tackles like Mayan Williams, which is why I really like. I mean, when that dude is healthy, he's one of the best in the country.
Definitely in the beginning of the year. Yeah, for sure. So this year, it seems that Michigan and Ohio State both have some similar problems in the red zone. And another comparison you can make is like the Buckeyes versus Michigan State, and then Michigan versus Michigan State. Now that didn't translate last year to a valid comparison, of course, but this year, Michigan didn't even use Michigan State's secondary against them. They just ran the ball the whole time. I don't know if that's a reason. I don't know if they're thinking like we don't want to put JJ McCarthy in a bad situation and we'll just run the ball because we can. But that seems like a mistake if that's a conscious choice, because he clearly needs the reps, like actual game reps. And we made this gripe about the Michigan offense last year because Cade McNamara, you're like, hey, he needs the reps. If he's going to play someone, let him pass the ball. Like they beat Rutgers by a touchdown last year. And, everything worked out okay, at least for the Big Ten. But I don't really think, I think that the red zone thing for both teams, like both team strategies this year might be, okay, let them run the ball, let them pass the ball, get them into the red zone, and then they'll fizzle out. And so I am just a little concerned in that regard, because if you have like this awesome run game, why would that not work in the red zone? It just doesn't make any sense. So I think Michigan.
Yeah, I would think that Michigan would be able to, just between your running back and your quarterback running, just those two things without even passing. I would think that would be good enough in the red zone.
Yeah. Yeah, and JJ McCarthy is like leading the country in passing efficiency. It's like 75% average right now, I think. And he didn't have that great a game against Michigan State. So you would think he'd be able to complete a pass in the end zone. Yeah, it just doesn't make much sense. Unless, which I hope, but I seriously doubt, is that Jim Harbaugh is playing like the best game of possum ever. And against Ohio State, they're just going to start rifling the ball down the field, but that's probably not going to happen. I think he's gonna. I can tell by your smile that you don't really think that either.
I think he's gonna keep running, and if it works, then they're gonna win. If it doesn't, they're gonna lose. They're gonna do what they did last year, and either it's gonna work or it's not.
So let me get your opinion on this, and this is about Michigan. And you probably haven't watched as much Michigan football as I have, of course, but every defense so far has played Michigan. They haven't played defense to stop the run. They've actually played like two high safeties. Michigan State did the whole game. I don't get that. I mean, it's stopping JJ McCarthy from going downfield with passes, but why would you be afraid of that versus Blake Corum running? I am
Yeah,
shocked that I'm not seeing that.
Penn State did the same thing. I have no idea. It doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, if I would be trying to stop the run, doing everything I can, and you know,
Yeah,
you're going to lose to McCarthy passing, so be it.
yeah, exactly. Let's let you pound. You did that. I don't think the Buckeyes are going to do that. I don't think. I mean, does it have something to do with JJ McCarthy being able to run the ball, maybe, or the fact that he is very accurate? Maybe not like downfield with the deep balls, but he's very accurate with the intermediate passes. I mean, is that something that makes a defense be like, well, we can't just commit to the run because they're just going to dink and dunk us the whole time? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, do you listen to Gerd's Michigan Monday reviews? Has he talked about that?
Yeah, yeah. He's really more like harping on JJ McCarthy just not taking very many passes downfield. I mean, he's noticing that JJ McCarthy has low passing yardage. The passes he completes are like all underneath, and he's concerned that that's going to bite him. Me too.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a concern. Like once you get to the bigger games, you're going to need to be able to open it up a little bit. But I mean, I don't think that they're going to need that much. Like, a couple deep balls a game. If they can connect on 2 deep passes, that should be enough with their running game. I mean, they don't need a whole lot.
If they could connect on 2 deep passes per game, that would be fantastic. But right now, JJ McCarthy has completed 4 deep passes for the whole year.
Oh, ouch.
And I'm not sure what they consider deep. But
what was the last receiver that you saw that was as good as Marvin Harrison? That guy's ridiculous. He's so ridiculous.
It's not fair. Like we've got all these like those nice little average receivers on our team, and the Buckeyes just keep pounding them out. He wasn't even like one of the like big time 5-stars you guys got. He was just like Marvin Harrison. Hey, it's a 4-star receiver. You probably thought he was going to be, lucky to get in the game and get a few catches, right?
I mean, it's not like people didn't hear of him and his dad. Like, how did the ratings get that one so wrong? I just don't understand.
No clue. But thankfully, it's thankfully though, the only good thing is he's not apparently, and you watch Zach Smith's show, he says Marvin Harrison is not that good in man coverage. And it's not because he can't catch the ball. I think it's just mainly because CJ is not getting in the ball very well in man coverage for some reason. I think CJ, if defense is in zone, he'll pick that apart. But he's not as good at man coverage. But a lot of teams can't play man coverage. They don't have the athletes to do that. They can't stop the run in that case.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll be interesting to see who. I mean, there was this one pass that CJ had against Iowa. It's one of the best I've seen. Like, there was 4 guys around him. He like threw it just over the hands of like 2 people, and then just under the hands of another guy, and it was just like right in his hands, right before he went out of bounds. I mean, it was just like the most ridiculous play, pass and catch, like crazy. I mean, he has like a career's worth of highlight reels, and it's only been half a year or 3/4 of a year. It's just incredible. I just can't imagine if we have JSN actually back this year. Like what our offense is going to look like. I mean, that's just going to be unfair.
I don't know that he even needs to come back. I think Ryan Day alluded to that. He was saying, yeah, we think he's going to come back this year, but if he doesn't, we don't really, we'll get along okay. And I don't know the way he's saying that.
Yeah, I'm not worried.
Do you expect JSN to come back this year?
Yeah, everyone that I've been listening to on the beat, I listen to several different podcasts, and they all expect that he'll be back at some point, whether it's the Michigan game or the playoffs. Like he's supposed to be back. It's not like a season-ending injury. So
it's not a Bosa situation.
No, that was a nightmare. I mean, God, we only got him for 3 games. That's such bullshit.
And his last year.
I mean, he had the talent to be like the best defender we've ever had, and we got him for 3 games this final year. That's just such bad luck.
Yeah, well, you still beat Michigan that year.
Yeah.
I can't remember what happened in that year specifically in the playoffs or whatever happened, but yeah, that's bad. If I was JSN, I probably wouldn't come back. I know his agent is probably saying, "Dude, don't go.
Think about
back."
this. So Olave could have went pro last year. He had a good season the prior year. He wasn't even injured. Okay, so he was expected to go like somewhere in the first. So he comes back for another year, and he goes into the top 10 or something. He was the first
I think
or second
JSN
receiver.
in the latest mock draft, JSN is on the top 10 right now. He has no reason to come back. Not at least not for NFL.
Because I can't imagine why you would
one
still
of the
be
mock
in the
drafts.
top 10. He doesn't have elite speed, so
maybe top 15.
I would think that trying to prove that you can make it through a season without having all these injury issues, that's going to be hurting his stock a little bit, I would think.
Are you lobbying for JSN to come back next year? Is that what I'm hearing?
No, I want him back this year. Next year is not going to be a title year.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so that's a good pivot point. Let's talk about the national landscape. So when we were talking earlier, you were talking about maybe LSU getting a little bit of love, a little bit too much love. Why don't you give your thoughts on that? I think I agree with you.
I mean, it's not just me. Vegas has, them losing by 14 points or 13 points or something this week, even though they have a home game against Bama, and Bama's favored by 13, and it's Alabama's ranked 6 and they're 10 in the new polls, and it seems like the committee is just completely forgetting their whole body of work. They lost to FSU and got crushed by Tennessee, I think, and just because they beat Ole Miss, who Ole Miss was losing to Vanderbilt this year at halftime. They're not the best team. Like, I don't know why they're ranked so high. I guess people just are in love with Lane Kiffin for some reason. But you play well at the end of the year, or right near the times the rankings come out, until you just forget about everything else. I don't ever remember that happening to us. You have two losses. They have two losses, and they're it's one thing that if you have two losses and by the end of the year and the conference championship game, maybe you can sneak back into it, like LSU did when they played us in the national title, right? So they snuck back in after everybody lost on the last weekend. Now, putting LSU at 10 this early is just crazy talk.
It's all for Alabama. I can almost guarantee it. It's all for Alabama. It's because when Alabama goes in and beats them, they're going to be able to, the committee is going to be able to say, oh, Alabama beat a top 10 team. Yep. It's like Steve Deese. I don't know if you've heard of him. He does Michigan podcast. He had a pretty good theory on all this. Oh yeah, you probably wouldn't like watching him. He's not obnoxious, but he is definitely a homer. I really like him, of course.
Of course.
But but the thing is, he said something pretty smart. He said, because, and I think it was him, I hope I'm giving them the right credit. Basically, the committee knows that next year they're going to the 12-team playoff. So this year, and the last year, it can be no holds barred as far as they can put in whoever they want. They can put in whoever is going to be good for ratings this year, because they can say, hey, we're going to a 12-team playoff next year, get off our backs, essentially. So this year, the committee can be the worst version of themselves that they want to be. And you know what? There's really not anything for them to fear, because it's going to the 12-team playoff next year. So we might be seeing exactly who the playoff committee wants in there. And I don't think they're big enough morons be putting LSU at number 10 or Clemson at number 4. It's like you'd have to not be watching football at all.
I mean, Clemson benched their starting quarterback in the last game, and you're going to put them 4?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just insane.
They had to bench him, and because he was playing terrible.
Yeah.
and they're going to put them at number 4. It makes zero sense. And it's almost like if you read like what do you think? Like when you read between the lines and you look at how they ranked it, like what are you seeing? Are you seeing basically
they just want the blue bloods?
We want to punish Michigan for their terrible schedule, and we want the SEC at least 2 games, at least 2 teams in the playoffs, preferably 3.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think that they want the blue bloods, so they want Clemson and they want Alabama or LSU or Georgia or Tennessee or all of them. And what happens if Ohio State or Michigan like lose a game and then also lose to Illinois in like the let's say like we drop a game and then lose to you or something, and then you guys beat Illinois but then lose to them in the Big Ten championship game, something weird like that.
Ohio State and Michigan both have at least 1 loss.
Yeah,
it would be the committee's dream. And you know what sucks? The AD for Michigan, Ward Manuel, is on the playoff committee this year, and he could not get Michigan ranked above Clemson. Like, what is the point of having your AD on the committee if you can't even get above Clemson this year? Like, seriously. But you're right. I mean, I think they're going to – but the only good thing is because the way the SEC's turning out, I'm pulling for – doesn't matter. Georgia or Tennessee can lose. Whichever one loses. No, it doesn't matter. Whoever Alabama plays, Alabama has to win that game, because that will give all of them 1 loss and put Ohio State or Michigan at the number 1 spot in that case. I think they'll be number 1 because one of them will be undefeated. We think they'll be undefeated.
Yeah, and then the other thing is, so you have. I mean, I think ideally for me, like I think I'm rooting for Georgia to win, I think I kind of like the best of both worlds for me would be I want Hendon Hooker to have a bad game and Tennessee to get boat raced, because then that's going to put them out and it's going to make it so Stroud has a better chance to win the Heisman. So I have like multiple reasons to root against Tennessee. And I mean, Tennessee's like they're 8.5-point underdogs too at Athens. So
are they really?
Yeah. So are the number 1 team, 8.5-point dogs.
Hilarious.
Yeah.
My
and Georgia just.
I mean, I think they're going to lose.
Their top linebacker, one of their top defenders, is out for the year. So the only real thing that I can think of is like, I mean, it's a home game and Tennessee hasn't played well on the road. That's the only thing I could think of.
I don't know how it's going to work out. The thing is, last year, I know this is a different year, but last year, I feel like Alabama was probably going to beat Georgia in the national title game if they hadn't lost Jamison Williams.
Oh, of course. I mean, if you watched the first time they played, he was the difference in the game. Right.
So I feel like Tennessee is going to go to Georgia, and if they can throw the ball like they can, I don't know if Georgia can stop them. I mean, even with Georgia's defense last year, that awesome defense, like I still think, Bama would have won with Jamison Williams. I think Hendon Hooker, and then what's that guy's name? Hyatt?
Yeah.
The receiver.
Plus they have another receiver who's actually their number 1 receiver who's coming back too. Like their JSN is coming back.
The number 1. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's going to be at Georgia, and Georgia might just Georgia them to death with the run game, and play awesome defense.
Well,
maybe we'll have to see.
The other thing is, so
if they can get pressure on Hooker, then it's over.
Tennessee has a good run defense and gets good pressure, but their pass defense is their weakness. So Georgia's really good at intermediate passing, sort of like Michigan, but they have no deep passing game to speak of other than their tight end. So, they basically just sort of their running back and their tight end, and that's like their whole passing game. So if Tennessee can even slow them down a little bit, or maybe most likely if they're going to win, they'll probably need a few turnovers, because I don't think that their defense is going to be able to do a whole lot. Whereas I I have a lot of faith in Tennessee's offense, even against Georgia's defense, which is really good. Like I think that the only thing is potentially, being an away game might be tough for them. That's like the only thing that's like if it was a neutral site or at Tennessee, I would definitely be picking the Vols to win. Just being in Athens,
Yeah.
and Tennessee doesn't play well on the road. That's the only thing that has me a little worried.
Interesting. So, okay, who's your top four? We can do this every time we actually talk and have a show.
Okay.
We can re-rank who we think is going to be in the top four based on what happens. But right now, what do you think is going to happen? Give me your top four at the end of the season that's going to go to the playoffs.
Well, I'll say I think right now the top four should be based on who I think the best teams are right now. I think I would have Alabama number 1, Ohio State number 2, Georgia number 3, and Tennessee number 4, and Michigan number 5. I think Alabama, they have like their one weakness was they have one corner that was like killing them, and Tennessee exploited the shit out of it. And now Rick's, the 5-star transfer, is finally starting, and all of a sudden their pass defense, which was their only weakness, their Achilles, has been fixed. And I think in a rematch with Tennessee or anyone else with a good passing, I think that they really, I think now their only real weakness is going to be like they don't really have a really strong, they don't have really any super strong receivers. So they have like solid passing game, but it's mostly like short passes and a really strong running game. And between the running back and Bryce Young running the ball, like that's going to be hard for anyone to stop. And Bryce Young is just Houdini back there. So I think that they, until Ohio State can get some people that are hurt back and healthy, until that happens, or unless that happens, I don't think that we can beat them. So, but if we get JSN back, we get Cam Brown back, Mayan Williams back, if these guys are actually healthy, then I think we can play with anyone. But it just, really depends on that. And right now, like Alabama has the best with their new change of corner. They look unstoppable in my opinion. And I think they're going to smoke LSU, and they're going to be getting credit for their top 10 win. And I think they're going to, I think they could easily win by, 14 to 17 points this weekend. So if I were a gambling person, I would be betting, even as an away game, I'd be betting on that pretty hard.
So at the end of the season, what do you got? Ohio State number 1?
Well, at the end of the year, Ohio State would still probably be number 1 because we would
end of the year, I think, and before the playoffs.
Yeah.
So.
I think that we would be number 1 going into the playoffs. I think Alabama will be number 2. I think Georgia then would be probably I think it's either Georgia or Tennessee, but I'm going to.
Assuming Georgia has one loss.
Yeah. So I think
Tennessee has one loss.
I'm thinking Georgia 3.
Are you really going to put 3 SEC teams in your playoffs?
No, I'm not putting 3.
Matt's playoff team is going to be Ohio State versus
Ohio
the other
State, Alabama,
SEC
Georgia,
teams.
And I'll put in. I hope Clemson loses, but
they could lose this weekend to Notre Dame. Let's hope.
I would think that potentially Michigan would deserve. Like I think Michigan would deserve the number 4 spot, but based on how they're being punished right now, I don't know. The only thing that would be able to make up for it is so they would have another win over Illinois to help them. And if they had a close loss to Ohio State at Columbus, I could see them getting in then at 4. I think they would deserve it at 4 easily. I don't know if the committee is going to still punish them for the early out of conference, even though like they've been pretty dominant in a lot of the games outside of like a Maryland game, which was a little closer than it should have been.
Everyone wants to see the Buckeye offense versus the SEC teams. Everyone wants to see the Buckeye offense in the playoffs. And me too. I'm actually I don't want it to be at the cost of my team, of course. But
the funny thing in my scenario, it would be
Alabama
1v4
Tennessee.
So it would be a Big Ten rematch, Ohio State versus Michigan in the first round, and then Georgia and
That they'd never
Alabama.
do that.
So they would never do that. So they would switch something around, and they would put like Michigan number 3, and then they would drop like Georgia to number 4. So then we would play Georgia in the first round. So that's our reward for getting the number 1
and then we would get to play
Georgia.
Alabama.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think maybe we'll get a little help with Notre Dame beating Clemson this week.
Exactly. And what happens with TCU? I mean, if they go in, they're undefeated right now. They could easily win the Big 12.
Except for the committee is just giving them the finger right now. So I think that they would be deserving. Totally. I think that they would be deserving, but I don't think that they're getting enough respect to make it right now. So I think you're going to get a one loss.
They should be above Clemson too.
Them. Oh yeah.
TCU should also be above Clemson. I mean, they've got better wins. Like, who have they beaten? They've beaten Oklahoma State. They've beaten Texas. These are all ranked teams, by the way, that TCU has beaten. Who else have they beaten? I don't think they've played Kansas State yet, but I could be wrong about that. I haven't followed them very closely, but TCU should totally be above Clemson. Yeah. Clemson should be where TCU is, actually.
Yep. That's what I think most people think. That sounds right to me.
Yeah.
I think TCU doesn't have the best defense, but they've had some good wins, and their offense is one of the best in the country, and they're undefeated. So I think you got to give them the nod. Like, I would think that maybe they would deserve the 4 spot, but I don't. I mean, so do you think that they're undefeated, have a great offense, and they win the Big 12? Do you think that they're going to go in over a 1-loss Georgia or a 1-loss Michigan?
Probably. I mean, if they're already going to put Tennessee in, if they're already going to put 2 SEC teams in, which we know they're going to do, they're going to do that. I mean, there's going to be at least 2 SEC teams in there.
Well, no, I'm saying
there's going to be the
Georgia,
winner of Michigan
Georgia
and Ohio State.
Georgia would have beaten Tennessee, but then lost to Bama in my scenario. So I'm saying that they would still pick Georgia because they would have beaten the number 1 team in the country at the time, in addition to Oregon, who's a top 10 team. So they're going to put them in over TCU. So then you have Alabama and Georgia, and then you have Ohio State, and then are they going to put in Michigan for the 4th team, or are they going to put in TCU?
I think they would put TCU in because Michigan wouldn't have even won their division, much less their conference. And TCU over here has won both.
Well, we made the playoffs without.
I wouldn't feel right about Michigan going there.
You know what? That's what happens with SEC. Alabama made it without winning the division, and Ohio State made it without winning the division. So it's not unprecedented. It's happened at least twice that I can think of.
It's not, but there wasn't as much competition when Ohio State did it in 2014, because I remember they were on the cusp.
Well, you know who we screwed in 2014. TCU was ranked ahead of us, and we jumped.
Yep.
Poor bastards.
TCU gets screwed.
Yeah, so they'll probably get screwed again.
Obviously, that worked out. Yeah,
so they'll probably get screwed again this year.
Could.
So maybe Michigan will get in over them, because I have no faith that the committee is going to see, like, okay, TCU is not going to make us as much money because people aren't going to watch as much as they would watch Michigan, right?
This last year before the 12-team playoff, they can put in anyone they want.
That's what I'm saying. Like, Tennessee or Michigan seem like much better choices to me as an option instead of TCU. So I just don't think
they would get absolutely grilled to the bone if they put in a 1-loss Michigan over an undefeated TCU that won their conference. Grilled to the bone.
Well,
only for Michigan to go in and get beat by Alabama, which of course is what's going to happen at TCU.
So maybe the more likely scenario then is going to be, since they already like us more than you guys, the more likely scenario would then be you guys beating us and then us making it in over TCU, because we would have a good schedule, and then only 1 loss after playing a really good year. So I don't know. I think that would be more likely.
That. Like Michigan and Ohio State, we've played basically you guys have played Notre Dame, granted, but the one team that we both played, Penn State, is their best game by far, the best competition. We rolled them, and you guys almost lost to them. Of course, it was at Penn State, and the differential between where Ohio State's ranked in that playoff ranking and Michigan is just amazing. Like it just goes to show how much they really, really want Ohio State in that playoff.
Well, you're only looking at one game. You're forgetting about Iowa. We beat Iowa way worse than you beat Iowa. And Michigan State.
But that was
and Michigan
we
State.
were playing at Iowa.
So we played at Penn State.
I don't know if Iowa is a very good barometer for really any kind of playoff committee decision.
We beat Iowa and Michigan State. See, that's what I'm saying. None of those matter because it's all about matchups. Because we match up better against Iowa than you guys do because they're a run defense heavy team. I mean, they have a good pass defense too, but they have a better run defense. And also,
so from what I'm hearing,
I do believe you gave up 274 yards passing, which is kind of a criminal stat.
It's weird that you know the exact number so well. Why is that memorized?
I don't know.
How are you able to just pull that right out of your hat?
Because it's just seared in my mind that anyone would give over 100 yards passing to Iowa. I was like, this is just insane. Although I heard that they scored like 30 points against Northwestern, who we play this weekend. So Northwestern must have the worst defense in the history of football.
Yeah, Iowa looked good against Northwestern. But here's my last question about Ohio State. So from what at least the talking heads have been saying, it's not really the running backs issue with the running game. It's the offensive line actually run blocking. If I was a Buckeye fan, that would probably concern me for not just playing Michigan, but playing in the playoffs. I don't think that the Buckeyes are going to be able to, even with the best, with CJ Stroud and the receivers, I don't think they're going to be able to pass their way to a win without some running game. I just don't think they're going to. I mean, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. And I don't think that we can win unless Mayan Williams is healthy, basically. So if he's healthy, it's fine. If he's not, we're screwed. It basically comes down to that.
Do you think it's Mayan Williams?
Oh, yeah. It's not the line. It's him. When you have both those guys healthy, there's just a clear difference. Like Henderson doesn't know. He's just missing the hole too much and he can't break tackles. And Mayan Williams, when he's healthy, is just unstoppable. I mean, you saw like the first time the other reason why we weren't as good in the red zone against Iowa is he had hurt his knee at the end of the game that we played before Iowa. So he wasn't effective. Like both our running backs weren't effective against Iowa. But Henderson, just because he's not that good. And Mayan Williams, had some sort of knee injury he was still dealing with. So, you can tell when that guy's healthy. Like, before that game, he was number one in the country in yards per carry. So when he's healthy, he's like, he reminds me of J.K. Dobbins. Like the guy's just ridiculous.
Yeah, that's the key. Because that's where the red zone will probably heal itself too. Is the running game.
So if the other thing is, so if Mayan doesn't come back, but then we get JSN, then we don't need to run. So if we get JSN back or we have Mayan back, those are the two things we need. That's it. One of those two.
Going to run the Texas Tech offense.
Yeah, and we also need to have two healthy corners. So if Brown, I didn't hear anything about his injury being serious. So if he's back and either Mayan or JSN come back, then I think we're golden. Cool. It's all about.
All right, man. Depth. Yeah, I agree. All right, man. Well, let's sign off here because I'm about to fall asleep. What time is it? 10:30.
Yeah.
And since this is live streaming, I can't edit out any of our mistakes, which is fantastic. So until next time, man.
All right. Go Bucks.
Go Blue.